Hello, I'm Bill Prom, Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Bob Woodruff Foundation. I welcome everyone joining the call today and look forward to hearing from our presenter. This is a Got Your Six Network webinar from the Bob Woodruff Foundation. The network connects more than 425 organizations supporting veterans, service members, and military families so we can learn from each other, see what's working in other communities, and coordinate better. The goal is simple: help the people we serve reach quality support faster and help you accomplish your mission more effectively. Today's topic, from research to relationship, making the ask in corporate fundraising, is important because corporate fundraising is one of the most impactful ways to expand organizational impact, especially when it's approached with clarity, strategy, and alignment of missions and values. In this webinar, we'll explore the full life cycle of successful corporate fundraising, from identifying and researching prospective partners to tailoring outreach, developing compelling collaboration opportunities, and maintaining long-term relationships. I'm excited to introduce our presenter today, Lee Thorpe, Chief Advancement Officer at SBP, formerly St. Bernard Project. Between 2011 and 2024, 99.5% of congressional districts in the United States suffered at least one federally declared disaster. Founded in New Orleans in response to Hurricane Katrina, SBP has evolved to become a leading national disaster recovery and resilience nonprofit that remains in affected communities to help them rebuild and return home long after the news cycle moves on. SBP is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, shrinking the time between disaster and recovery for communities at highest risk of natural disasters and extreme weather events. Since 2006, SBP has rebuilt homes for over 7,500 disaster-impacted families across 16 communities. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be here today. Again, my name is Lee Thorpe, and I am honored to be presenting to you all. I just started working at SBP in May 2006, so 2026, I'm sorry. So I'm fairly new to the role, but I am a native New Orleanian and was working at United Way of Southeast Louisiana in May 2006 when the organization was founded 20 years ago. So I'm intimately involved with the work that SBP has been doing the last 20 years, bringing volunteers and corporate partners that I manage through my job at United Way to the organization. And it's just an amazing full circle moment to be back here. The last 5 years previously, I was serving as Vice President of Partnerships and Advancement for the National Urban League in New York City. And I was managing corporate support, corporate philanthropy from the country's most philanthropic organizations, socially conscious organizations with gifts ranging from $20,000 to $10 million. So through the work at National Urban League, my start working at United Way of Southeast Louisiana, and then other volunteer organizations that I worked with, I've got a good breadth and depth of various size organizations and how to frame an ask on a corporate prospect. So hopefully I can provide some opportunities to give you suggestions for scalable prospecting and outreach. So I'll go through very quickly. This is our wonderful agenda, and I'll just kind of kick it off. In addition to my work at various nonprofits throughout the country, I also served at Capital One in Louisiana, overseeing corporate philanthropy and volunteerism. So that really provided a unique perspective and making sure that and understanding how companies are prioritizing and operationalizing and determining their financial investments. So I think that, again, overseeing corporate philanthropy in that space, but then going to oversee corporate requests has been a nice marriage in understanding what companies are looking for. The very first part of any foundational support or foundation plan for a nonprofit is building a case for support. So I'm going to speak more about what a case for support should look like and give you suggestions on how to build that. It's imperative that your work and the impact that your organization creates is clearly outlined and is convincing to a prospective donor, either individuals, foundations, or companies, which we're going to talk about today. And I'll go to the next slide. specifically to talk about the case for support. Actually, I'll go back. I'm so sorry, Hunter. I'll go back to the previous slide. Thank you, because if we could go back 2 slides. Sorry about that. Yes, there was a question from the audience in advance about financial stability that I thought I would address here. The question was, what financial indicators or practices most strongly signal that a nonprofit is reliable and a good long-term partner? So I thought I would talk about this at this part of the conversation. So there are many indicators in this space, but I think the first and most obvious indicator is your organization's ratio of operating or overhead and your fundraising costs in comparison to your program expenses. So if your operating and fundraising costs are less than 20% of your overall budget, that looks really good to a funder. The lower you can get that percentage, the better you look. So I think you should, my suggestion would be to take a look at your organization's current ratio. And if it looks high, do an analysis of how you're accounting for your staff time and your expenses. If any of that staff time is directly associated with managing a program, it could likely be included in your program expenses and not your operating budget. The second area that funders look at is the diversification of your revenue streams. So if you have multiple organizations, whether they're corporate, foundations, even government funding that are supporting your organization, as well as major donors, individuals that are supporting, that looks really good to a funder. It shows that you are stable and you're not going to be fully reliant on their funding to sustain your programs or your work. Especially in this day and age, corporate philanthropy is shifting from multi-year gifts to single-year gifts. And often a company's corporate social responsibility strategies and priorities are changing. So companies know that they can't be relied upon as the primary source of income to keep an organization or program running. Even if a company doesn't request a list of your current revenue streams, I think it's really helpful to share that when you're crafting your requests. I think you should also show that your organization has healthy operating reserves. I'm going to use COVID as an example for that. Many organizations had to dip heavily into their operating reserves when either earned or philanthropic revenue couldn't be secured, and it keeps nonprofits afloat during unprecedented times. So companies want to make sure that your organization's stable and longstanding, and showing that you've got healthy reserves is a really good way to do that. So now I'll go to the next slide and talk about building a strong case for support. So when I say a case for support, I'm talking about a document, whether it's printed or digital, that all nonprofits should have before making any plans to request support from corporate institutions. So there are many components that are important to have in a case, but it should always lead with your organization's mission statement. So of course, this mission statement is your never changing 1 to 2 sentence declaration of why your organization exists, what specific issue you're working to address, and who you serve. If your organization also has a vision statement, which can be dynamic and evolve as you set long-term goals for yourselves, that's also helpful to share in a case for support. It shows that you have a goal in sight and your organization's strategies are in alignment with that vision for your future. And I iterate this part over and over again, that a compelling case for support should always start with the why. Why is your organization in existence, and what is the issue you're working to overcome? Then you can move to the what. What is your organization doing to address the issue? And then you can move to the how, the more granular details of how your organization specifically is working to solve the problem. Many organizations are immediately going to start or think to start with the what, and maybe even immediately go into the how. But starting with that why should always be the first place when you're creating a compelling case for receiving support. Another component of this case is to make sure, especially with businesses and corporations and requests, to make the business case of why you're good for their business specifically, or why you're good for the business community. If you're a social service organization that's serving or individuals, share data that shows how the individuals you serve have stable jobs, or access to childcare, or live healthy lives, or have a stable home environment and more productive employees. They're more productive employees, which means that's a direct benefit to their company specifically, or at the very least, they're stable contributors in the economy, which is also good for business. Sorry, my lights just went off in my office, so it got dark for me. Um, but large or small, if a company has a corporate social responsibility strategy, or even if it doesn't, corporate funders are always drawn to nonprofits that can elevate their brand through their investment. So this could be as small as a logo and a mention of the company at an event. It could be a logo on the website. It could be a social media post thanking the company, or a blog post or inclusion in your e-newsletter recognizing the gift, or any other opportunities that you can find to recognize the company on a public stage for being good corporate citizen. This free marketing add-on and brand awareness is a large driver to companies' decision to make a contribution. So any opportunities that you include, how you will recognize them, should be included in your case for support. Even if it's not included as a benefit in advance of making an ask, I strongly encourage your organization to find every way to recognize a company whenever possible, as a stewardship tactic that will go a long way when requesting renewed commitments, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. And lastly, employee engagement opportunities still hold a very strong value proposition for companies. If you can offer volunteer opportunities for employees, which could look very different, it could be an in-person group activity, a virtual project, or even pro bono capacity building support, that goes a long way for a company's employee engagement objectives. You could also offer an opportunity to provide trainings or webinars to the company's employees on topics where your organization has subject matter experts. That goes a long way in creating a mutually beneficial philanthropic partnership with the company. Okay, now I'll go to the next slide. And just again, making sure in anything you're doing when you're thinking about your building your case and building out your plans, that you have a variety of investment areas to offer to a corporate partner, or to align with what you know a corporate partner is interested in funding. So there's unrestricted funding opportunities, which you could call general operating funding, which fuels the work that your organization is doing. It's critical. It's sometimes the hardest gift to receive, but if you can tie it directly to the work your staff is doing, including your maintenance men, your building, keeping the lights on, that's all fueling the work to run the programs and create impact. Then again, direct program investments and really outlining the programs and initiatives that your organization does in a clear, data-driven way is a great way to grow investments. Planning grants are also an opportunity for corporations to support. Some organizations may need additional seed funding to put plans in place for programmatic execution or for programmatic creation. And so there are a lot of funders that will invest in a planning grant. Of course, capital projects are another way for a company to support and get a lot of brand recognition attached to naming opportunities within your buildings or your capital projects. Event sponsorships, again, large or small, every nonprofit has some kind of event that is an easy turnkey way to gather corporate support and potentially grow volunteers and provide stewardship opportunities for a company's employees. You can also ask for in-kind contributions. If a company like Lowe's, when I'm thinking about SBP and the work that we're doing to rebuild homes across the country, in-kind contributions go a long way and reduce that line item in your budget that would have to be utilized with philanthropic revenue otherwise. And then again, pro bono support for capacity building, legal services, financial services are a great way to think about monetizing the donation in a different way. Excuse me. Pardon. Okay, I'll go to the next slide and really talk about, sorry, y'all. Pardon me. I'm not used to talking this much, so long. Um, Sharing impact data is really critical for nonprofits to prove that companies to prove to companies that there has been a return on their philanthropic investment. So whether a company is large or small, they all have a limited amount of philanthropic dollars to invest every year. And many organizations are making requests on a daily basis. And so it's really imperative to provide transparent, data-driven reports that can assure that these companies, that your organization is achieving the goals you told them you'd be reaching because of their support. I'll give an example. I is in my first month with SBP, I had an introductory meeting with the Hearst Foundation and Hearst Media, and they were so congratulatory and impressed by the way that the SBP development officers were constantly updating them on the impact that was being created because of their support on a regular basis, not just in the agreed upon annual report that we promised in a partnership agreement. We were regularly checking in and giving them updates. We were providing quarterly updates and then sporadically just reaching out. And that went a long way. And it was acknowledged by the Hearst Foundation. And they said that we are one of the only organizations that they fund, of the hundreds of organizations that they fund, that had such regular communication. So I thought that was really impressive. So the next slide. So again, while sharing data is critical, sharing compelling success stories is just as important. While data and metrics are going to show the scope of work, success stories are going to breathe life into those numbers that you're sharing. Funders need confidence that their dollars are actively changing lives. So success stories are going to show exactly how your nonprofit is translating those contributions into measurable results. And then going back to brand recognition, when you're sharing success stories through public channels, make sure you're recognizing those corporate funders in those stories for being the reason your program has seen success. These lives were created because of their support. Your building was opened because of their support. Nonprofits should never forget that we cannot do any of our mission-driven work without the support of funders fueling that work. And the next slide, we'll talk about the priorities. So after you've ensured this solid foundation for your organization, it's time to put together the building blocks for a successful solicitation strategy. So the first step is to research all potential corporate funders and confirm that there is alignment with your organization. That could be from seeing the company's previous investments to other organizations with similar missions or program areas. It could be a leader at the company with a close connection to the organization or cause. It could be a small or large business whose customer audience mirrors your organization's stakeholders or your clients. If you can't find alignment in one of those areas, you should not be including the company on your list of prospective donors. It's a waste of your time and it shows disrespect to the company that you didn't do your research before approaching them. I'll give an anecdotal example. While I was working at Capital One overseeing philanthropy, we have 4 specific focus areas that we're prioritizing our funding, and this was clearly outlined on our website. It was small business development, affordable housing, financial education, and education. And so if an arts institution was coming to Capital One to ask for support, I immediately had to say, I'm so sorry, you don't align with what our priorities are. And that's, again, a waste of the fundraisers' time at the arts organization. They didn't do their research, and it's kind of a waste of my time as a corporate funder. And those are things I'll kind of remember in the future. So a second step, after you're mapping out where the alignment lies, identify who the decision makers are at the company for the philanthropic investments. If it's a small business, it's likely the CEO, but for a larger company, it could be a member of their corporate social responsibility team. It could be a marketing leader. It could be a public affairs team member, or even a member of HR who's overseeing a company's employee resource group. Employee resource groups are often uh, incorporated into companies, whether it's a demographic demographic of individuals that might have their own budgets to distribute and donate to the charities of choice that align with their focus and their passions. So it's really critical that all of this research and identification is clearly input into your organization's database. So whether you're using sophisticated CRMs like Salesforce or Razor's Edge, or you're using smaller platforms like Microsoft Access or even Excel, all of this data on your prospective companies, in just like you would do for your individual donor data, should be kept in one centralized database. And then again, before you're going out to make an ask, it's really important to have a customized, well-prepared solicitation plan. So this solicitation plan should include, this is just a few samples, it can definitely be more robust, but you want to list who your primary fundraiser at the organization is, who the main points of contact are at the company, what you're planning to ask them for, what program or initiative or channel, like I mentioned before, whether it's unrestricted or programmatic or an event sponsorship, how much you're going to be asking for. And again, that should be based on either your program budget or the research you've done on previous corporate gifts that organization is given. You should also be including in your plan if any volunteers need to be involved in the ask to be door openers. If you're going to be making a multi-year request, and again, also including when the best timing is to make that ask. You should be looking and seeing if the company has specific windows for submitting requests. Most large companies do. So whenever possible, make sure that all of that information is clearly outlined and identified before moving into your solicitation plan. I also strongly encourage you to utilize volunteers to support your fundraising efforts. And on a future slide, I'll give you a little bit of an anecdote about how I built a campaign cabinet while at United Way to grow the unrestricted revenue for the organization. So I'll go to the next slide. I'm just going to reiterate kind of what all of the previous notes were. Make sure you can identify how your organization is uniquely qualified to partner with this company, and making sure you're aligned with the company's corporate social responsibility priorities and their history of philanthropic investments before diving in any further. So next slide. When you're putting together your solicitation plan and your priorities, make sure that you have organized documents, that you are communicating with your team or on your either development team, your marketing team, your leadership, your volunteer leadership, that you're training them and communicating with them with exactly how the solicitation or the ask should look. Making sure you're assigning the appropriate solicitors. It might be your CEO that needs to go into the room because they carry the strongest weight, and it should be more of a gravitas to the ask. It could be a volunteer where it's more of a peer-to-peer ask, or it could be one of your major fundraisers on your team. Or if you're a team of one, which I know so many organizations are, it's going to be you. And then again, making sure your timelines are really well laid out of every step along the way, when the ask is made, when you expect to hear back from them, when to follow up, all of the pieces and parts, and follow the timeline to the T if you can. So I'll give you an example of some success I've seen in putting together these thoughtful campaign fundraising plans. While at United Way, I oversaw a fundraising campaign with a $14 million goal across 7 parishes, which are counties across Louisiana. And I started with my first year overseeing the fundraising team with building a campaign cabinet of about 4 volunteer fundraisers. Well, over the course of 5 years, I was able to grow that to 35 volunteer fundraisers by just bringing people in and thinking about who are individuals that I want to, first of all, they have the capacity to give more money as individuals to the organization, or they're leaders at a company where I think the company has more capacity to support our organization. So Valero Refining is a refinery in St. Bernard Parish of the greater New Orleans area. They're one of the largest employers in St. Bernard Parish and had a $300,000 annual contribution to United Way through their employee gifts, a corporate match, and events that they would hold for us. Even though $300,000 is a massive amount of money, through all the research I did, I saw that they had so much more potential to increase their employee giving, which would in turn increase their corporate match. So I recruited the head of the refinery to serve on my campaign cabinet, asking him in a really thoughtful way and telling him what his roles and responsibilities would be as a volunteer fundraiser, and making it really easy for him to open the doors for companies that I already identified as a potential connection. So this refinery leader joined the campaign cabinet, started learning more and more about United Way through the meetings we were having, and then became an advocate for United Way among his leadership team and his employees within our company campaign at Valero. And in 1 year of having this gentleman on our campaign cabinet and more involved, we increased the campaign from $300,000 to $400,000. So again, utilizing stewardship tactics through volunteer engagement as a way to encourage or increase corporate support. So perfect segue to corporate stewardship and retention. It's really important when you're thinking about stewarding a corporate partner as a way to not only just be a good partner with them, but also to renew a gift and renew support. So making sure you have clearly outlined partnership agreements, no matter how large or small your organization is really important. Depending on how large the organization that's funding you or how large you are will depend or change how large the partnership or detailed the partnership agreement needs to be, which I'll go into more detail on a future slide. But having partnership agreements, having year-round communication with funders, it should never be communicating about an ask, getting the money, and then not talking to them again until the reports are due or you're asking for another gift. There should be constant communication, whether it's scheduled or whether it's sporadic and just when you're thinking about them or making them feel like you're thinking about them, but you've already mapped it out in your calendar to follow up on a regular basis. This is really critical when you're thinking about stewarding your corporate funders and goes a long way in building that trust. Another area to build trust and build respect is to have any opportunities to acknowledge your corporate partners or your funders publicly. So again, all the areas I shared before that could be in your case for support, whether it's blog posts or social media posts, or even just if you're giving presentations out in the community about a program, mention the funders that have funded that program specifically. And then always have immediate response when any requests come in from your company. I do not like to have more than 24 hours pass before I've immediately responded to a donor, even if the response is, I'm looking into this and I'll get right back to you. It's really important to have a short turnaround with getting back to your funders because they're going to see you as a reliable resource to them, and they're going to develop a closer relationship with you because they know that you're responsive. And making sure that you're always adhering to any timelines and deliverables that have been set out. And again, that's just another way to build trust and be seen as a good nonprofit partner that a company feels comfortable investing in. So next slide, I'll go through some areas that should be part of your partnership agreement and your communication. Always, again, however robust your agreement is, you should always include the timing of the grant, especially when sometimes gifts come in mid-year. Be very clear about the start date of the grant term and the end date. Always make sure that your agreed agreeing upon with the corporate partner what outcomes or key performance indicators you're going to be measuring, and making sure that that's part of the deliverables that you're providing. And then in addition to those outcomes, what other deliverables are expected? Are there some marketing collateral that are expected as a deliverable? Is it a employee engagement opportunity? No matter what you've talked about with them, making sure that that is clearly outlined in the partnership agreement. Put together a stewardship calendar as a way to remember to stay on top of these relationships with your companies. Schedule check-in meetings. Again, with some of my funders that I've had at the National Urban League that were $5 million funders, I had weekly check-in meetings with them, because that's the gravity of the gift, and they need to be treated as such with a $5 million gift. Now, obviously, someone that was giving a $200 gift, or even at Urban League, which is so large, someone that was giving $100,000, I didn't have as regular of check-in meetings with, but I was absolutely scheduling those and making sure that the company knew that I was going to be checking in and providing updates on their investment throughout the year. As I mentioned prior, making sure you're outlining any employee engagement opportunities that you've agreed upon, and any marketing and storytelling involvement that you want to incorporate into the relationship. So another success story, we at the National Urban League had the great fortune to receive a $1 million gift from Google in 2020, when immediately following the civil unrest that was happening, and the focus on racial equity and healing. And I was able, through all of the stewardship tactics I talked about before, to develop a really close relationship with Google. We were meeting regularly. I was responding immediately. They had my cell phone. They could call me with any questions. I was able to ask them questions throughout the year about their funding priorities and how they made decisions about their funding priorities. And knowing that, unfortunately, sometimes moments don't always last forever. Moments in time, or moments of focus for a company, I was able to talk to them about what their other priorities were. And because I knew that workforce development and AI training was really critical to their business and to their philanthropic strategies, I was able to immediately, within the grant year, introduce them to our workforce development team and start having them learn more about the workforce development programs we were doing. And we were able to secure a $4 million gift out of, in the same year, where we had the $1 million unrestricted gift. So the $4 million supported workforce development, it supported event sponsorships for brand recognition, and it also supported our unrestricted operating work. So again, these are large scale samples and success stories, but hopefully you can think about ways to incorporate them into the work you're doing. So I just talked for a very long time. So I would love to take this time now to answer any questions from the 85 people on this webinar.
Lee, thank you for all of that. And for all of those who wrote in questions beforehand and during this, thank you for the participation. We have some good ones here for you, Lee. I'll start off. Are there any unique strategies for corporate fundraising for individuals not employed by the organization, perhaps a volunteer or a board member?
Yes, and I forgot to mention that I've been the development chair or the board chair or supported fundraising efforts for more than 20 nonprofits across the greater New Orleans area. Once you're a fundraiser professionally, everyone asks you to help fundraise as a volunteer as well. So I think that some of the strategies and the reasons I think I've been successful as a volunteer fundraiser is because I can understand the capacities of different sizes of fundraising teams. And everything I want to do is to add capacity and not take it away. So again, it is not helpful if you're a volunteer fundraiser to be putting additional work on the staff. So if you're going to be a volunteer fundraiser, own the work, understand that it's going to be based on your level of capacity as a volunteer and your skill set, what you can do to support the organization as a volunteer fundraiser. So from a small scale, it could just be, again, opening doors But again, if the staff doesn't have the capacity to take the meeting or put together the proposal in advance, it's not helpful to open the door. So work with the development team or the nonprofit staff. Maybe it's a program team member, to ask them whether they need support for funding, and then learn as much as you can about it so you can become it really versed in the work, and then ask for a meeting with a corporate prospect to take the program staff along with and have that kind of dialogue. Your value is in your relationships, and then you can let the staff do the work that they do as subject matter experts.
That's excellent. Thank you. Here's another one. Sometimes young or startup nonprofits have the evidence to prove the efficacy of their programmatic model, but they don't have the corporate relationships to build revenue to grow to the next level. What would you use as an approach to gain that financial support?
Yeah, I really think, again, that's where and not to keep relying on volunteers, but I think that volunteers are to me, the easiest way to open doors to people that have never heard of your organization before, even if you know that they align. So think about people that are already donating to your organization, either someone that's donating a really low level, but constantly year after year. Loyal contributors are your best volunteers if they're willing to do so. And again, obviously, major donors that are giving leadership gifts of even 1,000, 10,000, $100,000 or more would probably, because they believe in your work, they're investing in it, they'd be willing to open a door. So identify who those potential corporate partners are. Look at anyone on your donor list that may work at a company that does business with that business, or works there, or has some kind of connection. Maybe they're a leader in the community, and ask if they would be willing to open the door. Most people, when they're asked for help, will give it if it's, again, easy for them to do.
Great. And I think this next question complements this well, and I'd be really interested if it's the same answer for a reverse side of the coin. Uh, what about, or what would you suggest for a cold start situation, i.e., a nonprofit that doesn't have much in the way of metrics, but just a few years of good operations, maybe an annual symposium, something like that under their belt?
Yeah, I think, you know, I can't stress enough how critical metrics are. So I really think that these are all building blocks. So you have to crawl before you walk, before you run. And to try to run out of the gate immediately without having the data and the metrics on hand is not going to get you very far. So it could potentially be that one of your board members works at a company that can give you a grant or a gift because they just believe in you and they trust that you're going to take those dollars and build it into collecting the data. So maybe it's finding philanthropic support in order to hire a person that's going to do data collection and outcomes measurement. But again, that has to be the first thing you do before you do any fundraising, is to make sure you have information to share about where the money is going and what the impact is that your organization is creating. And as you mentioned, I think symposiums and public spaces, open it up to the group. If you're in a space and you're talking about the work you're doing, there's probably other organizations that are doing similar work or collecting similar data. So see if there are any overlapping opportunities or collaborative opportunities to work with them to create, impact that can be shared data.
Excellent. Now, a slightly different tack, back to some of the research and prospecting. Do you have any insights into best practices regarding the role of AI in the realm of prospecting research, tailoring outreach, or ongoing communications? And with that, like maybe any trustworthy platforms you've had experience with?
Yeah, I do. I mean, Salesforce, like, what's really great is so many platforms are already incorporating AI. So it's not like you have to go find an AI platform. They're already being incorporated into their models. So again, Salesforce and Blackbaud products almost all have an AI component. And it's really just giving yourself the time and prioritizing being trained on those tools that exist. Gemini is amazing. I have every single call I'm on Google. I have Gemini taking notes because they're immediately not only taking notes, but identifying action items and they can be shared with all the people involved. So when you think about the time that's being saved through those kind of AI tools like Gemini or oh, what does Microsoft use? Copilot, other things like that. But it's really helpful with even basic things like Gemini or Copilot to spend an hour a month learning and diving into all the tools that it can provide you and the resources it already has. Most of the time, unfortunately, the tools already exist. We're just not taking time to learn them because we're so busy with all the other things. But it is really helpful if you can be it proactive. It's going to save you time in the long run if you can be proactive and dedicate time to learning it.
Excellent. Now another one here. As a nonprofit grows, they may shift from primarily volunteers to actual paid positions. Do you have any insights to best approaches for this shift, especially as it regards to the fundraising side of it?
Yes, it's funny because I've worked for nonprofits that were, very, very heavy volunteer run, and then again going through change management to be staff led. And there are so many pain points there because at some point you really do need to shift from um, what I'll call a working board to a governing board. And again, that happens slowly as you're growing and you're moving along. But volunteer fundraisers, it's really think about how to slowly taper yourself away from the work. It's not going to happen overnight, but how do you slowly incorporate? Okay, maybe we do a fundraising campaign for one staff person, and that's the whole plan is to hire an executive director and get maybe get a corporate gift for the hiring of the executive director. So then the executive director is reporting to, I'll use the New Orleans Saints as an example. They provided a grant to Dress for Success to do that in New Orleans for us to hire our ED. And so they love that they get to say that they provided the infrastructure for Dress for Success to be successful and not always have to be reliant on volunteers. And then again, Dress for Success reached out to Capital One and asked for volunteer capacity building to get a program leader in place for its suiting program. And, slowly working their way and utilizing corporate support in order to do so is really helpful. But again, the volunteers should be tapering themselves off from being running the organization. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, nice. This next one I think is definitely felt by a majority of the Got Your Six network. Since we all are veteran serving organizations, uh, there always seems to be many organizations that can show impact within a corporation's giving priorities. In this case, if they have a military veteran focus.
Mhm.
What do you think is the biggest differentiator that can make a nonprofit stand out? Perhaps having that connection, knowing the right person, offering more brand awareness, maybe something else.
So we're specifically talking about organizations that say that they have a military veteran focus. That is a great question because that was even an issue we had at United Way. Is there's and it happens to be in New Orleans. There's more nonprofits per capita than any other community in the country, and so with only so many resources, everyone is fighting for attention. So again, I think that that's where those organic relationships are helpful. Is it going out to chamber events? It's speaking on panels in front of corporate partners, showing yourself as a subject matter expert and a leader in the space? How do you stand out because you're creating work and you're creating impact that's being visible? Brand awareness, visibility, any kind of earned media attention. It's a lot easier to get a company to open a door if you're a bright, shiny light at compared to some of the other folks in the same space you are.
Here's a new one. For more strategic standpoint, let's say assuming an employer is receptive to your nonprofit because of their alignment, but you offer kind of a two-lane approach, donations that cover costs and impact, and a for-profit approach that serves their self-interest. I'm assuming meaning the corporation there. Both organizations working in concert together, so we have the flexibility to appeal to both. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I mean that is kind of the to me the fundamentals of creating a good corporate partnership is that win-win mutually beneficial partnership. And that's probably why you've heard me use the word partnership over and over again and not just a gift or philanthropic investment. It should be a partnership. It should be how do we think about ways that we can each benefit each other? You want to be seen as a good corporate citizen in front of specific audiences. You want to engage your employees. You want brand recognition in front of your um, client base or customer base. You want your CEO, who's brand new, to be at the table with other corporate leaders that are on your board as well. You want to be, again, positioned among the other corporate partners that you have as a good a part of a cohort that's involved in this work that serves veterans. There's a lot of ways. And I always ask, I specifically, again, coming from Capital One, when I come into a meeting with a funder, I said, how can we support you? It is that after I talk about my work and make the request, I say, what do you need? What are the things that we can offer you? And I throw out some options to get their brain going and know that I'm really thinking about it and I'm really willing to do whatever I can within reason, obviously. I will use this as a cautionary tale that I didn't bring up before, but there are a lot of companies that will do how do I say it, like competitions. And I say they like to hitch their star to a nonprofit's donor base or stakeholder base. And so they'll say, we're offering a competition to whoever can get as many people to like our Facebook page as possible and then we'll give $25,000. They're paying for your donors. So I would strongly advise you to not think about that as a possible revenue stream unless it's you really can see the benefit and the ROI on you're doing that. They're buying your lists. That's really all they're doing. And so I had to, unfortunately, while working at United Way, so many companies after natural disasters would come to us and say they wanted to do things. But if it didn't feel like it was beneficial to our organization and it was more beneficial to theirs, I had to say thank you so much, but at this time we're going to politely decline.
Absolutely. Yeah, making that again the win-win relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's another one. So as we mentioned before, the Got Your Six network is all military veterans serving, but sometimes that's only one aspect of an organization. Um, for some of those, maybe their veteran serving program isn't the one necessarily bringing in the revenue for them, but they're looking to fund specifically that program. Uh, do you have any recommendations for an approach like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes there's an opportunity where you could think about if there's two separate programs, one that's being funded and one that isn't. If there's alignment or there's connectivity between those two programs, how do you sell the overarching umbrella of the work that you're doing in the entire space? So, how to maybe there's this is program one and this is program two, but really the initiative is enveloping both programs. And then when you're building a budget, you can tell the story about how program one and program two are going to lead to this overarching initiative. And we'd like your company to think about supporting the overarching work. So you're still going to get the impact reporting that we're going to tell you about what you were already funding, but we're also going to weave in the work that we're doing there. Then maybe again, it's a 30-70 split among the what is being funded, but at least it's bringing more attention for the company into the fold of the veteran serving program. I hope that felt
Yeah.
very vague, but I hope that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, I think that covered it, kind of identified it well. Thank you. Um, for maybe some of the our smaller network members that I have much smaller budget, but they have that urgency to grow, are there resources you recommend for some of that corporate sponsor research, especially if they're free or low cost?
Yeah, I some companies or small nonprofits will ask me if they think instrumental is a good tool for prospecting research. I was about to be real casual. You guys, listen to me. If you do a basic Google search for what are the top companies that have veterans as their corporate social responsibility strategy, AI through Google will give you a very long list of it. I think that there's a lot that is um, ignored in what can be done in basic Google searches to fuel a lot of the information that you need to be successful in your fundraising. I also look at when I'm thinking about foundations. I know we're talking about corporations, but a lot of corporations have a foundation entity. You can look at all of their 990s and see where they're giving. If you've never done that before as a small nonprofit, I strongly encourage you to type in, let's say, Enterprise Foundation 990. It'll come up, and if you look at their 990, it'll give you a list of all of their top donations that they've made each year and how much was given to each nonprofit. So you can see again really easily who they're giving to, what they're giving.
Yeah, I'd even add on too, something to consider is the cost and time if you're investing in some of those resources. If you're strapped,
Yeah.
a great tool is great to have, but you might not have the time to actually take advantage of it too.
Yeah. I hate to say I don't do besides when for some larger nonprofits utilizing you know well it's not really for companies but wealth screenings and things like that. Other than that, I just think a lot of the prospecting and research can be done without purchasing tools.
Yeah. Then this may be kind of going towards the other end of the spectrum. Uh, do you have different advice for a nonprofit that's maybe trying to pursue an endowment a pathway or just basically growing that strategic reserve? Are there different considerations?
Yes, I strongly believe that every nonprofit should start building an endowment, no matter how small it is. A lot of times, you're not going to have corporate support for endowments. That's kind of where you can get individual or planned gifts. But again, if I'm tying it in with corporations, think about the leaders of those companies as not just a decision maker, but a potential donor. If I'm getting a $1 million gift from Google, but the general counsel of Google is on our board. I want to get from Halima as well. And I also want to continue to have a relationship with Halima, and long lasting relationships become opportunities for planned gifts. And all of your planned gifts can go into an endowment. So I know that feels like, again, a crawl, walk, run, but it's a really, if you're thinking about corporate giving, I don't see endowment as being something that a corporation is going to give to. But again, think about the employees at the company that are loyal to your organization, and think about plucking them and building an endowment out of those individual gifts.
Yeah. It's called development for a reason. It takes
Yeah.
time, definitely.
Yes.
All right. I think this might be the last question here. Uh, What would you do if you felt that your organization is truly uniquely aligned with a corporate funder, but you just seem to be hitting a brick wall? You're not making any progress. Are there different approaches you would take, or is there a point where you just kind of pass on it?
Um, so I believe in being pleasantly persistent. And I think again, maybe because I was a journalism major, like I'm just going to research and try to find any avenue to get in the door. So I think again, why I mentioned the various teams or team members that could be reached out to. So if it's not the CEO, maybe it's the head of HR, maybe it's the head of marketing. And again, the case or the way in is going to be different based on who that person is. But don't just think about reaching out to the CEO. Think about all the different decision makers and leaders that have a vested interest in a philanthropic gift. So and then again, think about volunteers and finding the right volunteer that could open that door and answer the email. No one is going to answer an email from a random person that they've never heard of before or heard their name before. They will answer an email from someone that they know or respect in the community or as a friend. So make sure you're trying all of those things. If you really can't get in any way, and it's been 2 years of different ways you got to take them off the list.
I think that that's a good one to end on, really highlighting that it's all relationship based at the end
Yeah.
of the day, whether it's corporate, individual, family foundation. So thank you, Lee, and thank you all for joining us for the webinar today. We encourage you to share this information with your networks. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank y'all.